Now, if you can open up your extended chords FLP, we can review what we already seen in the PowerPoint, the sounds of our extended chord family. Let's start with our suspended chords. We're just going to click on this pattern and let's just play it. And again, I created two channels, the block chord and the arpeggio, using our piano plugin in FL Studio. I'm going to mute these channels as I explain each one so that we can hear it cleanly. So this is a suspended second. Let's listen. That's the block chord, arpeggio. It's that lack of minor third which really creates a longing to have a resolution. And the fact that it's in a minor key signature really drives that point home. So now we have an understanding of the suspended chord. Let's go to our suspended fourth. Let's enable it again. Now we have an arpeggio. Very common progression, very common, builds a sense of tension. All these suspended and extended chords at times can really cause quite an amount of tension and anxiety in a listener, because there is an intrinsic value that most people want to have, which is a resolution. So the ear naturally wants to hear the resolution of that musical conversation. And it's hard to be left hanging, so to speak, by having these minor chords execute in the way that they do. But the flip side is we have our major chords. So if you want to have this major or minor, it's up to you totally. It depends on your project. Now let's listen to our major or minor sixth. Let's listen to it. Let's take a look. We have a minor sixth there, based off the D flat. Now let's listen to the arpeggio. Slight optimism, actually, but at the same time, a sense of uneasiness. Now we're on our C minor ninth. Let's listen to it in our block format first. Now let's go to our arpeggio form. Okay, now that sounds very, very familiar. It's just a very common structure in most music, not just film music, but music in general. You have to have some kind of levity and leverage musically to create space. It's very hard to create musical motifs being really tethered to one octave. So you need the extended chords just to open up the voicings and open up the sound that you need to really enhance your project. So let's listen to that again. to the 11th chords. Now we're going to start really opening it up. Let's listen to the block 11th chord. Okay, now let's listen to the arpeggio form of that chord. Okay, now the reason that I'm extending the tonic here in this case, or all my examples really, for the extended chord family, is because I'm prepping you. I want to make sure that you get the concept that your tone, your root position is going to be sustained more often than not when we start building up the project, building up the song. Now this piano is going to be substituted by a cello or bass or violin. You're going to have very extended notes, and then you're going to have your quarter notes, in this case, play above your notes or above your tonic. So you have your other intervals playing above your tonic. That's the root, no pun intended, of much of the music that we're going to create. So this is just the 11th chord. You can transpose this or convert it to any other key signature, and it's still going to sound relatively the same. Again, it depends on the key signature that you're using. A G minor 11th will have the same effect. A G major 11th will have a more uplifting and positive effect. Now, that being said, let's go back to our lists. Now we're going to our 13th chord using the C minor scale. Let's start with our block. Now all those notes played together, that will lend itself to more of a jazz, gospel, worship sound. While it's helpful, it's really hard for the listener's ear to differentiate all those sounds played at once. The arpeggio form is the best way to approach your voicings or your arrangement of how you play your chords. Now let's listen to the 13th in the arpeggio format. Okay, now a little joke, I guess. The 13th is kind of alone up here, and that's fine. That's completely fine. You can shift it down if you wanted to into the A4 range, but that's not necessary. Let's go to our augmented chord, as we discussed earlier. Now let's play the arpeggio. Very common phrase. Now let's go to our diminished chord. Let's start with our block first. Listen to it. Actually sounds like there's danger coming, or some kind of very ominous event that's going to happen. Your diminished chord is perfect for horror sequences, nightmare sequences, things that are scary or very uneasy or foreboding. That's where you want to use your diminished chord. It's used, but it's not as frequent as, say, your 7th or your suspended chord by far. That was the extended chord family. And now we'll go into our next module.